Okay, Polition on multiple object tracking and so on. So today I just want to set out what I think Polition's picture is, and locate it more. I mean, he's an experimental psychologist. Locate what he's doing in our philosophical concerns. And on Friday, I'll move more into looking at critique of what he's up to. But we had the basic idea last time of a multiple object tracking experiment. I mean, since Polition began these experiments, there have been, I think, hundreds of studies of them. But the basic pattern is this: you've got your screen with 8 possible targets. 4 of them flash, then they all start moving. Then at the end, one flashes, and you're asked, "Was that one yours?" Yeah, I mean, this is just what we did last time. So we don't have. This is just to show another picture. You don't have to do this one, but this is the kind of thing we were doing last time. Do you actually want to do this thing? Okay. Right. Is that one of yours? Yes. Well, you guys can do this one. Do you want to do that again? Yes. Right. Okay, so that's your targets? Okay, so the top right? No. Okay. Okay. We can do some more if you like. I see. Right. If I realised you're so keen that I'd have more embedded here. Let's see. Okay, I don't think we did this one last time. Oh no, we did do this one. Yeah. How about this one? That's okay. Right. Okay, and yeah, I think it's this one we didn't do last time.
Oh, we're not Yeah. No.
Right. Okay. Well, one last one. Right.
No.
You don't know? Yes? Put up your hand if the answer is yes. No? Well, if you don't know. Okay. Okay. Well, how is it that you're doing that? The idea is that you're not doing that by having descriptions of these things. in your visual system, there are tags that you can use to tag objects. Polition somewhere uses the example of Plastic Man. Plastic Man had very, was like made of plasticine and had very long fingers that you could kind of shoot out and zip onto people. You see what I mean? So that's very handy. And the idea, and that when you do that, you know, if I say I'm going to keep track of 4 of the people in this room by doing, bzz, you know, and shooting out my long plastic fingers on 4 of them, then I'm not keeping track. I can keep track of the people when I do that, right? But I'm not doing it by describing them. Yeah, it's something much more primitive than that. So the idea is that what you guys are doing in these demonstrations is your eyes are, as it were, shooting out long plastic fingers, or in some more primitive way, just tagging those things. There is just a tag here. It's, if you thought of it as the object out there being magnetic and a magnet and your eye being just tuned to it, the indexes are just tuned to external objects. Yeah. They don't really get a computational account in Polition. They're just primitively locking onto objects out there. His idea is that, suppose you're looking at a scene, the way it goes when you're attending to a scene, right? If you just look at a whole bunch of people, say, your eye just roves over the crowd, then you might not be getting any particular information about anyone. But suppose you're looking at the scene with a view to addressing some particular questions, like, is somebody talking? Is somebody chewing gum? You know, that kind of thing. Is somebody talking on their iPhone? That kind of thing, right? Then what you do is you are interrogating the scene, right? You're looking at the scene and asking a question of the individual people in the scene. And the idea is, the way it works is, in vision, you have a welter of incoming information, right? That's obvious right now that just as you look at the room, there's a complex scene. There's a ton of stuff coming in, and you have to select. You have to choose bits and pieces from that welter of information to ask questions about. So here you have this vast automatic parallel input into vision, the whole scene being processed. And then these are like these visual indexes. You have 4 tags. And what you can do is ask of any one thing you've tagged, is it glowing, say, or is it upright? Is it chewing gum? Whatever your thing is. So push this to select the tagged object that you're going to ask questions about. And then up here you have feature detectors for all the features that you can visually find out about. And if you want to ask, is it glowing? If P1 is glowing, then you push this button to select a particular object. And then up here, you ask, is it glowing? Pushing the right-hand thing, yeah? As Polition wisely says, you need 2 hands to operate this machine. So that's the idea is that your visual system works like that. There's that basic ability to just tag onto objects that is put to work in the visual object tracking, and then in the multiple object tracking, and then when you're attending to an object, what you're doing is selecting one of those objects that you were tracking, and then interrogating it to ask various questions about it. Yeah, I mean that's quite plausible. That's kind of recognizable. You get this whole complex scene, and then you lock on to one thing or another and ask questions about it. Yeah, and the idea is that's the foundation of reference. You have up to 5 of these visual indexes in your visual system. The index tags the object, and the tag is a way to name or refer to individual parts of a scene independent of their properties or locations. So this tagging is prior to any ascribing a property to the thing. Right? It's more basic than saying the thing has any property. I'm not sure this adds a whole lot, but there's this, here are your tags in here in your head. Here is your eye. There are the various things out there, and the causal links between the things out there and the tags in here are determining the referential connections. Yep. So this is a causal picture of reference. As I said, this has been very fertile, this idea. One way it comes up is with the analysis of children learning the object concept. Some of these demonstrations there had objects, some of the things you were tracking were objects going behind barriers. Yeah, you couldn't see the thing you were tracking for a bit. Yeah? It's been a big question in developmental psychology. How do children get the concept of an object that, you know, if I do like this, one thing goes behind the other. No mature human takes questions whether it's the same thing coming out as going in. But the idea, the traditional idea from Piaget was that's an achievement, getting that notion of an object that it continues through occlusion. And how do you, what concept of object do you have? And one picture has been the child is developing a theory of objects when the child is growing up. So being a child, this theory has actually been developed in most detail right here about 100 yards away in Tolman Hall by Alison Gopnik and her colleagues. So the idea is that when scientists are learning about electrons, say, you have one model of the electron, and then you do some tests and experiments, and you find, I'm not getting the right predictions with those tests and experiments. So you go back and you revise your model of the electron. You keep working on what you think an electron is. And you can think of what children are doing with physical object as like that. So the concept of a physical object is a theoretical concept. And at the start, you think, well, they're just sense data, right? I've got one object here and then another object there. But what you find is you improve predictive accuracy by postulating a range of objects that can continue to exist through occlusions. Yeah? So the physical objects that we refer to are all theoretical entities in the way that electron is a theoretical entity. It's just that we have to develop this theory over time. You have concepts like woman, man, tree, and so on that articulate just what your theory is postulating. Now, the picture that Pelishin's line of thought suggests is that, so this would be the background. So this would be the background to reference. Reference is only possible once you've postulated the objects that you're going to refer to. Pelishin's picture suggests a quite different approach. Pelishin's picture suggests that getting the object concept is just a matter of getting those visual indexes up and running, able to lock onto things, so that the basis of your ability to think of it being the same object here as here through the occlusion is not that you formed some theory. The point is rather you've got this visual index and it's just primitive. The way it works is it keeps locked onto the object as it comes out from behind the barrier, the way it just did for you guys there. So Pelishin's line suggests that all these decades of theorizing about where the object concept comes from were actually a mistake. The concept of a physical object that is the basis of reference actually shows up already in the most elementary attentional operations of the visual system. It's not a theorized notion at all. Yeah, so that notion of persisting physical objects that aren't sense data, that go beyond your current perception of them, that's just there in vision already to start with. Yep. Sorry, there is. When babies are born, they don't understand object permanence. Well, the thing is that's a very general object permanence there. If it just means is it the same object through rotations? Yeah. Newborn babies seem to have that. Yeah. So newborn babies have a notion of object stability, say, it being the same object even though you rotate it. If you take one object and rotate it, and another object, if you take one object and rotate it, and if you take one object, let the infant get used to it, and then present it with a rotation of that object and a genuinely new object, the infant will prefer to look at the new object. Yeah, is bored with this object. Yeah. So it recognizes sameness of object through rotation. You see what I mean? And that's, I think that's from very early. That's for just a few days, I think. Children will do that. There is development in your concept of object. I mean, the visual system, for example, when you're tracking objects, if we didn't do that in this class, but some of these demonstrations, you can have 4 items moving around, and they change from being, one of them changes from being a rabbit to being an elephant to being a box. Radical changes in what kind of object it is, and you don't notice it. When you're in the thick of doing this, you just don't notice this kind of transformation. Yeah. So that's a notion of object that's more primitive than woman, man, tree, or so on. Yeah, you're not thinking of it as belonging to any particular sort. You're just tracking a spatio-temporally continuous thing. Now, of course, you develop, so you say at a theorized level, but that can't be that can't be the same thing. Yeah, there is development in your understanding of what it is for it to be the same object over time, but the underlying things are solved by the visual system itself. I mean, what basically gets you onto the notion of a continuing permanent object is the operation of the visual system. The visual system itself, not your thinking about it, is operating with the notion of a continuing object. That's the picture at any rate. Yeah. I mean, this is all hotly contested. Yeah. I mean, as I say, not 200 yards away, it would be hotly contested. Yeah. Yeah.
So I understood your question to be because infant does not recognize the same object that we have before it.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So wouldn't that contradict this has this?
That's right. But the thing is that infants do recognize it being the same object but passed behind a barrier. You know, you do things like there are endless variations on these tests. Yeah, but you do something like I put the computer here, here, right, and then I occlude it. Yeah, and then I crash this down and I go straight down. Infants are very, very surprised by this. Even though the object was occluded, they implicitly take it, well, it was still there. And it must have been, how come you managed to get that down? Yeah, if the object was still there. Yeah, so that there are lots and lots of tests. Yeah, but there is one test, for example, where occlusion through a barrier. It is something that very young infants have. Sameness of object through occlusion. Infants still have. Of course, there's much more complex things like are you the same people I was talking to last week? Yeah. The visual system alone won't do that for me. You know, this kind of primitive tagging. It's not that you just pass behind a barrier for about a week, if you see what I mean. Yeah. There are more long-range questions about permanence that aren't addressed by this at all. You know, that your visual system can't be doing. That really must come from somewhere else. Okay, we can do more of this in another session if you're interested. Object concept and inference? Maybe a little bit more. Okay. Right now, I just want to crack back on all the stuff we've been doing in the class and say where this stuff about visual indexes fits in. This stuff about visual indexes is pretty close to where we are, I think, in thinking about these big questions about how signs refer to the world. That's why it's worth going over. Remember Russell, there's a basic class of names that get tied up to objects, but not by being defined in terms of descriptions. Dear old Russell, was it yesterday we were doing this, yeah? That was Russell's bottom line. And the idea was that a description is when you've got a predicate, like wrote Waverley, and you've got a quantifier into that predicate, exactly one person. And that's quite different to when you've got a name coupled up with wrote Waverley. Yes? We're all comfortable with that? So then, if names are more basic than description, what is it that's fixing the reference of a name? What was Russell's answer? Concepts. Cluster concepts. Those would be descriptive. Sense data, that's close, but sense data are what you're referring to. Indexicals are the signs you use to refer to them. You're in the ballpark, but that's right. But you gave me the name of what you're referring to, the stuff that's right here, and you gave me the name for the sign you're using to refer to them. But what is the connection between you and them? Perception. Yeah, that's close, yeah. Acquaintance, yes. Right. Yeah, Russell said it's acquaintance with the object that allows you to refer to it. Now, it's true that Russell thought of acquaintance as essentially a relation of awareness. You're aware of the thing. But this is not a bad way of spelling out what you might be meaning by acquaintance. Being acquainted with a thing is a matter of having it on your radar, having one of your trackers locked onto it, so then you can interrogate and ask questions about the thing, right? That's one way of trying to spell out what acquaintance is. And if you read the Polition article, it's very clear that's exactly how he's thinking of what he's doing. I mean, right at the start of the article, he puts it in terms of Russell and descriptions, that he thinks that these are Russell's logically proper names. The idea is that tagging is what Russell meant by acquaintance. That these tags are a way to name or refer to individual parts of a scene independent of their properties or locations. So they're not descriptive, right? They're not saying there's not a cluster of descriptions here. There's not a sense. It's got nothing to do with what objects, what properties or locations they're at. Is that very, very primitive Plastic Man style grappling onto the object. One thing that I think is mildly interesting here is that when we've talked about the normativity of language, we've always talked about it as a matter of getting it right or wrong in your use of sentences. Getting it right or wrong in your use of sentences. Yeah. True or false. But there's a kind of normativity here that doesn't work at the level of the whole sentence. It just works at the level of the name and the object. I suppose you're doing one of these tracking tasks and you lose track of one object. You confuse it with another object. Yeah. I mean, that can happen. There are these, what is it, three-card Monte? Is that the, am I thinking of the right thing here, where you get the cups and the balls, and your task is to keep track of the balls? Then if I'm juggling with the pens, and I say, okay, keep track of this pen, and I juggle them backwards and forwards, and you lose track and you swap one pen, you mistake one pen for another, yeah? That can happen. Then you've made a mistake, right? If you were trying to keep track of this one, and at a certain point it slid over and you were keeping track of that one, then you made a mistake. If you're chasing the guy who stole your bicycle, if you're racing down the street and you mistakenly lock onto someone else, then You have made a mistake in that using the tag when you lose track or confuse one object with another. But what's the mistake? It's not a mistake at the level of a whole proposition, because it wasn't that you were thinking, well, this one is the same as that one, and this one's the same as that one, and this one's the same as that one. You were just trying to keep your eye on the thing. You were just trying to do your plastic man tagging of the thing, and then one thing gets swapped out for another. It wasn't at the level of a whole proposition. It's sub-propositional locking onto an object prior to saying that it has this property or that property. You could put this in Dretschke's terms, that when you've got these visual indexes, their biological function is to indicate the location of your assigned target. Right? So that you've got these tags, and you have them for a reason. There are good biological reasons for having these. You need to keep track of your people, you need to keep track of your friends, you need to keep track of your enemies. It's just very important socially if you're out in a if you're out in a small group in hostile country. It's very important that you keep tabs on where everyone is and where your enemies are. That's the biological function of those indexes. So you can be going right or wrong in using a visual index in a way that doesn't have to do with having a proposition that's true or false. Another way of thinking of it is in terms of fodder and causal asymmetry, that if I think you stole my bike, if I've seen the person who stole my bike and I'm racing off after them, then I've got a causal connection between me and that person. But then at a certain point, they give me the slip and I start chasing somebody else, mistakenly taking it to be the same person. Then at that point, there's a causal connection between me and the later person, between me and the innocent person. But that's a mistake, because the causal connection between me and the later person is only there because of the causal connection between me and the thief. You see what I mean? So the causal connection between me and the innocent person depends on the causal connection between me and the thief. So, but it doesn't go the other way around. The causal connection between the thief and me doesn't depend on a causal connection between the innocent person and me. So in Fodor's terms, that's an asymmetric dependence. Yeah. So you can see these notions of normativity coming in without there being propositions that are true or false here. It's just, have I glommed onto this thing right? And that glomming on has got some normativity in a way that's prior to having the normativity of truth or falsity. Yeah?
So I think this visual tag theory
Yeah.
is really
Limited, yes.
What about names that we've never seen directly?
Yeah, it's
So
yeah, absolutely.
How does he, so like, I don't know, Waverly or Santa Claus, so how do we have to have something that we see and then we baptize them, the initial baptism, and then by the also change, how to have a name? Like, I feel like in the end you have to still give an account of how we get names.
I think that's right. It really is limited in just the way you say. But it's also true that in just the way you say, being able to refer on the basis of perception seems to be the foundation of all reference. Yeah, and you couldn't refer to people, to dead people and so on. I mean, long dead people. If there hadn't been people around who could refer to them, who could. Santa Claus. Yes, yes. Yes, fictional characters in general are really hard. I mean, there's no question about that. The natural thing to say about fictional characters is that you're not really referring to them, you're just pretending to refer to them. It's make-believe reference. Yeah, that in the sense in which I can refer to Sherlock Holmes, I mean, in the sense in which I can refer to Santa Claus, I can quite rightly say Santa Claus has a long beard. Yeah, I mean, if you say to me Santa Claus is clean-shaven, then that is just a mistake.
Maybe another thing that I probably someday, like maybe empty names or
Empty names, yeah.
in general
Oh, that's a very interesting idea. Yeah, yeah.
I had to go with it.
You couldn't have Gödel-Schmidt cases for fictional names.
Exactly, because they don't have like objective facts out there. They
Yes.
are totally made up by description.
That's a great question. So could it be Santa Claus doesn't deliver all these presents? They're actually delivered by Schmidt. Santa Claus just takes all the credit.
Yeah, so you can't say that.
Yeah, there's something crazy about that. I agree. Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's make it a homework exercise to think of a Gödel-Schmidt example for a fictional name. Yeah. Right. You see what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. The story of The Wicked Witch of the West. The Wicked Witch of the West isn't actually wicked. Yes. Yeah. It's yes. It's. Mm-hmm. Right. The Wicked Witch of the West is innocent. Yeah. Yeah. I would really like to know how that could be. I mean, the trouble is, it sounds like a joke. You know, I can imagine people getting up a campaign. The Wicked Witch of the Wicked Witch of the West is innocent. You know, the Wicked Witch of the West is a victim of stereotyping, or whatever. I can imagine that, but there's something kind of comic about it. If I wrote the story, I get to say, don't I? So I think that's a really interesting question. Yeah. Yes.
I mean, they were making a point about people living on their people, but I don't think that people who wrote the stories go, actually, she was innocent. They just wrote another story.
Is that a different story? Oh, I see. I didn't know this actually. I see. There are two. There actually is a story that clears the Wicked Witch of the West. Oh, I see. All right. So I'm. I realise it's my job as a professor to pretend not to know all this stuff. But I have to say that this time I actually don't know it. Right. Okay. I see. Okay. That's wonderful. Okay. It's a separate story, but it's the same witch, right? Assuming I understand what's going on. That's right. I mean, it wouldn't be worthwhile if it wasn't the same witch. You see what I mean? It'd be very different if you just wrote a story about somebody else. But this is meant to be about the Wicked Witch of the West. Okay, there you go. Why isn't that a Gödel-Schmidt case? That's a Gödel-Schmidt case, isn't it? The Wicked Witch. Well, I guess it. Okay. Well, yeah. Okay, that is way off track, but extremely interesting. I'll try and think about that some more for next time. Okay. So the bottom line was that that normative sub-propositional relation, getting tagged onto something, could be the foundation of all reference, whether it's fictional reference or reference to long dead people or whatever. That gives you your initial carving up of the world into the objects you refer to. Yeah.
It seems like having an object is enough to make you think object is enough. It seems like if I am looking at myself in the mirror, that I can't I tag myself in the mirror, but it's not like I can say, oh, you're Clara. Like I can't tag something I'm looking at in the mirror.
Why not?
It's not a separate object. It's me.
Okay, you might not realize it's you. I mean,
It could be informative.
Sorry?
It could be
Yeah,
informative.
yeah.
But I would still want to say, once I discover it's an identical relation, that it's Clara.
Right.
It's not like a new object.
It's not a new object, but it's the same object, yeah. But it's a new way of referring to it. You've got an informative you've got an informative identity.
Yeah, so the point being that just because I tag something, I can
This is interesting, but I'm not quite getting it yet. Suppose it's not in the mirror, right? Suppose I just see you and I tag. Why isn't that enough for me to be able to say, she's wearing a brown coat? Can't I do that?
That seems like enough, but it just seems like every case where I tag something is going to be a case where I have an object that I can put.
Okay, I don't know why does it have to be a new object? It might be an object I've referred to before.
So the idea would be that if I'm looking in the mirror and I've already tagged myself instead of looking down.
Yes, right.
In my visual index. When I see myself again in the mirror,
Yeah.
I have a second thing that I tagged.
Yeah.
Is that like new Clara? Like how?
I have been thinking of it a little bit differently. The next couple of slides actually said it. And you might well be right and I might be wrong here. I was thinking about how this Polish stuff relates to Frege on sense and reference, right? And Polisch's picture really is to sweep away the sense, right? There are no properties that you're using to pick out the object, nothing but this glomming onto it. So it really is trying to get this radical picture where there's just a sign in the reference. And the classic problems for this were informativeness and meaning without reference. Yeah, and I think you're raising a question about informativeness. Yeah, I was thinking that Polish doesn't really address this explicitly, but I was thinking Polisch's picture is that it's quite like Russell's, that is similar to Russell's, that you don't get informative identities using visual tags. That if you're doing the multiple object tracking experiment, if you're just keeping tabs on your objects, then it's not even possible for you within the visual system to put an identity sign. You know, the visual system itself just tags the things, and it doesn't raise questions about, might this one be just a mirror image of that one? Yeah, that can't be raised within the visual system. You, as a conceptual thinker with lots of descriptive resources, can ask, is that one the same as that one? So this is, maybe I'm missing a point here, but I think what I was thinking with, I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I put a tag there. I'm looking down at my feet, and I put a tag there. In the visual system itself, I can't even raise the question, is that the same thing? Yeah, but I can certainly tag them both, and in that sense refer to both.
So I can tag them both in the photos, but making it sort of
That doesn't happen in the visual system. That seems to me kind of plausible. Yeah. That the whole point about, if you remember these initial examples, like Darth Vader saying, "I am your father," or yeah. You're not confused, but that's not because vision itself is sorting it out. Yeah, I mean, it's because you have a reflective understanding of what's going on. Yeah, I mean, it takes children a little while to learn this. At my son's daycare, they did the mirrors, the self-recognition test that they do, where you put a red dot on the baboon's forehead and you show the baboon a mirror, and with a bit of luck, the baboon rubs the thing off. Yeah, because they recognize it's them in the mirror. Yeah, 3-year-old children don't do too good in this. So it takes you a while to get to that level of understanding of mirrors, that you know what's going on. Yeah, it's not that just, it seems to be a more sophisticated thing than just visually tracking objects. Yeah, you could visually track the thing in the mirror, and you could visually track those feet, but that doesn't of itself give you the ability to make the identity. Yeah. Am I right? Yeah. So the way Polish, it seems to me, avoids Frege's problem is to say visual indexes refer to external things, but the visual system can't formulate informative identities using them. And his solution to meaning without reference is also kind of like Russell's. It's if you haven't assigned a visual index to any particular object, then it has no meaning. Yeah. So there's no meaning, at the level of visual indexes, there's no meaning without reference. A visual index that is just resting, isn't currently being used to tag anything, has no meaning. Yep.
When it comes to the way in which we say, like, say we're looking, say, we have a sort of visual field in which a bunch of things are. Suppose, say, for example, like my visual field right now, like I'm tagging to say you, maybe the podium, the chair, and the screen, and the rest of the background is sort of like things in the picture.
Yes, right.
But it's not like really, it's not something I've really thought about or like even actively say perceived.
You mean the background? Sure.
Yeah, say if just come into this room and just
Sure.
look directly at you.
Right.
I haven't devoted, and I mean consciously haven't devoted any direct perceptual attention to any of the other things you're
Right.
seeing. But I don't have any like questions per se about what those are.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know if you've come across inattentional blindness. I'll try and show some inattentional blindness next time. Does that phrase mean anything? These just amazing displays where you get exactly this situation of, say, a TV presenter and a background. You watch the thing, the background is being shifted, the cabinet vanishes, the wall coverings are all changed, the lighting changes, all that background stuff changes. You're just watching it, you don't notice any of that. Very big changes in the scene will be completely missed. I was at a bunch of vision science postdocs a little while ago, and they were just getting inattentional blindness videos off YouTube. And for every single one, these are guys who spend their life working at this kind of thing. For every single one, there was someone in the room who couldn't see what the change was. Had to have it explained to them and had to go over. You see what I mean? There's a kind of statistical thing that often enough your gaze will randomly wander to the bit of the scene. You will index and interrogate the bit of the scene that's being changed. But even although there's lots of stuff in you, if as I was standing here, this is changing color or changing shape, I promise you there will be a significant number of people in the room who wouldn't even notice. Yeah, and it would be a different people every time. Yeah, because it's kind of random. Yeah. So I just mean to be amplifying what you just said.
Yeah,
That's.
So then, like, the sense that things that I don't think that I've consciously devoted perceptual attention to still have meaning. Would that just be like a?
They don't have meaning.
Yeah, no, I know, but I don't have the sense, like, for any
Yeah.
number of objects in the field that I actively tagged them.
That's right.
So then, but that's just part of the phenomenology that I'm experiencing.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So at one point, I would have had, tagged them.
No, you never have. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay. That's very good. Okay, it took me a while to get what you were after. If you think of your visual experience as representational all the way, so that every aspect of your visual experience is representational, then, okay. Then, where am I? The only things in your visual experience can be things you've tagged, because that's the foundation on this picture, yeah? Okay. So on that picture, you're not actually experiencing the things that aren't tagged. Yeah? And that actually is one way of interpreting those inattentional blindness experiments, that it's not even there in your visual experience. There's nothing there if you're attending to me on the podium, then there's nothing in your visual experience except me in the podium. Of course, you can shift your gaze, yeah? But that's all it comes to, that this other stuff is here. That's really counterintuitive. Let's talk about this next time. That's really counterintuitive. But it's hard to disprove. Is one of these refrigerator light things, is the refrigerator light on when the door's shut? Well, very hard to tell, because, whenever you open the door to have a look, you've opened the door. You see what I mean? So are you experiencing the bits of the room that you aren't attending to? Well, it's hard to know, because every time you try and check on something, you're attending to it. It's hard to check on what's there that's unattended in your visual experience. But somehow it feels to most of us like there's this rich, thick array of detail. And if the only way that there could be that rich, thick of detail there in your experience is that you're representing it, then Pelikan's picture would be wrong. But the right answer may be that it's not representational. We shouldn't think of perception as representational. Okay, that's a great question. It took me a while to get what you were saying, but we'll come on to this next time. Yeah. I mean, I will try and think of something to say about this next time. Yeah. Yes, there'll be another possibility. It's a kind of representation that doesn't involve articulating the scene into objects. Yeah, it's puzzling that because, you know, there's the chair and the desk there, and it's hard to know in what sense they could be in your experience, except as by being a chair and the desk. You see what I mean? Okay. Getting fireworks in the questions today, that's great. Okay. Okay. I want to make a couple of quick remarks heading up to looking more critically at Pelikan's picture. One is, remember we spent a while on these kind of premises, these kind of inferences, when we were looking at sense from the morning star as F, the evening star as G, the morning star as both F and G. So there's a missing premise you need, whereas with this one, there's no missing premise. Now, in Pelikan's kind of system, when you just get these tags and all you can do is ask for each thing you've tagged, what properties does it have, you can't make these inferences that involve identity. But if you can't do this kind of inference from the morning star as F and the morning star as G and the morning star as the evening star, if you can't do that kind of inference, then arguably you don't have conceptual thought. Conceptual thinking is just deductive thinking. Conceptual thinking is thought, I didn't put that well. Conceptual thinking is just thought for which deductive reasoning is possible. That's what you're doing in elementary logic. You're learning the structure of conceptual thought. But if you don't have that, then surely what's going on with these tags is actually more primitive than reference. It's not really conceptual thought. If you don't have the identity sign, and you don't have inferences that trade in identity, and you don't have those at the level of visual indexes, then visual indexes aren't referring concepts at all. And you might say it's a matter of they're tagging visibilia, or maybe they're doing something that's more primitive than reference. So maybe Pelikan's visual indexes belong to a level of content that's more primitive than conceptual reference. And just one last issue, and we'll do this more slowly on Friday, but in principle, you could have Pelikan's kind of causal contact with an external object, even though you weren't conscious of it at all. Have you guys come across blind sight? Blind sight? Blind sight is when a patient has damage to one half of their visual cortex. So if you get a bash in the head affecting just one half of a visual area V1 at the back of the head, then you're functionally blind in the left side of the visual field, right? The doctor says to you, is there a pen here? Is it upright? Is it tilted? Or what? Then we'll be done in a second. And you say, I can't see it. I can't see a thing there. And they say, well, go on, guess. We'll give you $5 if you guess. We'll give you a kick if you don't. And you say, okay, well, I'll guess. And you say, I guess it's upright. And people are reliably right about this. So you can be reliably right in guessing about what's going on in an area of the visual field where you're not conscious of what's happening there. So you could have Pelikan-style tagging of objects in the blind field. Yeah, you could have Pelikan-style tagging of objects without um, experience of objects. But it seems to me that without experience of objects, you don't know what you're referring to. Consciousness is really required for reference. And on that bombshell, I'll try and develop that a lot more in the next few classes. Okay.